Welcome everyone. Thanks very much for joining. It's amazing to see you all, and I think some familiar names there I can see. So thanks very much. If it's a weird kind of ridiculously early or ridiculously late time for you, if you're somewhere else in the world, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us. So tonight we're discussing a really important topic, but one that's probably not often discussed in rugby circles. So it's all things pregnancy, babies, and returning to rugby. So as women playing rugby, I think most of us are used to the juggling act. It's training, it's early mornings, late nights, work, travel. So I think it's fairly natural probably for us to assume that starting a family would be almost impossible. I know personally I've always had in my head rugby first, babies later. But the thing is, there's no hard and fast rule. It can be done, and there are some women here tonight to prove that. So our aim for tonight's session is just to have an open forum really to discuss the possibilities, the realities of it. I think both Davinia and Jenny will agree that it's not easy, but it can be done. And I guess to give those of you wanting to go down the dual path of rugby player and mum the tools to make it happen, and also just to give you some more information around what you need and what you need to consider to do it sort of safely and healthily. So we'll start with a little bit from the panel, and then later on we'll move to a Q&A at the end. So make sure you have any questions ready. So I'll ask you to just put your microphones on mute for the meantime, and then when it does come to Q&A time, I'll sort of direct to you. So I'll introduce you to the brilliant women that we have on the panel tonight. So Davinia Catlin, she's played for Harlequins since 2016, was a member of the England under-20s squad, began playing rugby at just 5 years old, and has also competed nationally in judo and played competitive netball. Alongside her sports career, Davinia's run an independent sports shop in Croydon called The Winning Margin, and in January this year gave birth to her first child, Caden. Welcome, Davinia.
Hiya. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So next is Jenny Lynn. So Jenny is a late sort of bonus addition to the panel, but we're so grateful to have her with us. So Jenny played flanker in second row for the England Red Roses from 1999 to 2007, as well as running out for Richmond and Saracens. She was part of the England squad who beat the Black Ferns on home turf in 2001, which, forgive me if I have a little tear running down the queue here.
Oh, it'd taken 10 years.
Exactly. So ending a decade-long unbeaten streak, I'll have you know. She was part of multiple 5 and 6 Nations Grand Slam winning squads during her career. Jenny also played in the 2002 and 2006 World Cups, and is one of few women to have played in consecutive finals, if not the only, if I have my facts correct. But perhaps most impressively, Jenny made the successful return to international rugby twice after stints away to give birth to her children between World Cups. So hi, Jenny.
Hi, good to meet you.
Thank you for joining us as well. And last but not least, Baz Moffat is a former GB rower and mum of 2 with 20 years experience working within health, fitness and sport. She made the transition from life as an elite athlete, during which she won a world championship medal as part of the Women's 8, to starting her own business, and recently co-founded the Well HQ alongside fellow experts in women's health, Bella Smith and Emma Ross. So Baz now specialises in pelvic floor health, core, nutrition and women's wellness, working with active women from all walks of life, as well as elite athletes. Thanks for joining us, Baz.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I thought what we would do, just to kind of kick off, obviously I've given you sort of a whistle-stop tour of Davinia, Baz and Jenny's sort of, I guess, careers to date, but I'll throw to you, Davinia, first to sort of introduce yourself, I guess, and give us a bit of an update on your rugby career and how things are going.
Yeah, thanks. I've always played, so when it got to a point where I want to have a baby, I always knew I was going to have one whilst I'm still playing. When I was about 16, I went out to New Zealand and I played out in New Zealand for like 6-8 weeks. And I found it amazing that all these women that were playing had their kids on the sideline, and the injured girls were looking after the young kids, and the mums were out on the pitch playing rugby. And so from a young age, I just thought it was a normal sort of progression that I'll have a kid and just get back to playing rugby. And then as you get into it, it actually doesn't happen that often, especially in Premiership settings, and the sort of like topper leagues. Bottom leagues are like below Championship. I think it's more sort of prevalent, which is great to see. But it'd be even better to see women in the top leagues having babies and not putting their lives on hold, because that's what you end up doing. I know I wanted to win another Premiership title before I had a baby, so I was earmarking 34 before I started a family, and it was just an arbitrary figure, and it's a bit pointless really, because you don't know so many things. And I learned that even if you start in January, you might not conceive until next January. And in my sort of thought process, I hadn't taken that into consideration at all. So it got to, and my husband's wanted children for I don't know how long, and he knew that it's important to me to be playing rugby on my terms, and to get to a stage where I'd be contented to have a year break and then come back into it. So it got to big game. We played out in Twickenham, and it was like the first sort of game of its kind. We played against Leinster, and it was incredible to play in front of such a big crowd at Twickenham. A game that I've always gone to watch, and we're like, we'll start trying for a baby now. And it doesn't matter if I don't play the final, and I'm not around to play at the lead up to all the games, because I've done it, and it doesn't matter. So in my head, I was okay about it, and then COVID happened, and I was really okay about it, because then it doesn't really matter, because we didn't even finish the league. But through that, there were so many like questions I had in my head. So if I was playing and we were still going through COVID, I would have been 12 weeks pregnant the day of the final of the Premiership final. And it's like, the question is, would I have been able to play? Would I want to have played? And all of those sort of questions, are not knowing, because I know if I'd gone back and said, like 4-6 weeks in, and you don't really want to start talking about it when it's so early on. If I'd gone back and said, I can't, I'm out, I can't do anything, but not given a reason, it wouldn't have gone down so well. So for my personal level, it worked out better for me, so I didn't have to shout about it. But hopefully now, the process for other girls coming in, it's going to be a lot easier for them to say, I'm pregnant, give me a plan to do. And then from then on, I spoke to the physio when we got back training. She said, go see a women's health physio. I saw a women's health physio, and the doctor advised me to keep my heart rate at 140 when I'm training, but no contact. Turns out that was like a walk for me, so I had to move it up to 170, and still obviously no contact. And then I trained on pitch until week 28, and in the gym till week 28 with things that I could do, because there were certain things I really couldn't do. And from week 28, I then wasn't allowed to be at Queen's because of COVID. So then I moved at home and did a lot more Pilates, and that's pretty much it. I gave birth on 28th of January. It wasn't ideal. I don't think any birth is, but it really wasn't ideal. I ended up having cesarean, and but consequently, I've ended up not having as many sort of like tears. So the surgeon I got was fantastic, and she basically pulled my muscles apart so she didn't cut my abdomen. And I've only got one big incision, so I haven't torn my pelvic floor, and I have not split my abs. So, swings and roundabouts on having a cesarean and not having a cesarean. But there are lots of women that have had cesareans and come back playing quite quickly or competing in their sport. And so now I'm like week nearly 3 months, and getting back to it very slowly. So just doing a lot of pelvic floor work and lots of walks, and it's pretty much it. It'll progress next week, but that's all I'm doing right now.
Yeah, and we'll come to sort of the process of returning to sport in a second. I think what would be really interesting though is, like you said, around you would hope that more clubs kind of have a bit of a plan for if a player comes to them and explains, what that they're pregnant or that they're thinking about possibly trying for a child, that they'll have something in place to kind of guide them through that journey. Jenny, if you could kind of tell us what, I guess, your experiences were when you were playing. I guess it'd be interesting to look at like traditional kind of expectations of female athletes versus now, and what's possible and what the kind of, I guess, reaction was like.
Yeah, so it's really refreshing actually to hear Davinia's story, because things have clearly moved on significantly. My eldest now is 17, and I remember going to my GP at 6 weeks pregnant saying, I'm an international athlete, I'm pregnant, I want to continue training, and I intend to return to my sport once I've had my baby. And he kind of looked at me as if to say, why don't you just take it easy and then like reconsider once you've had your baby? So I really kind of just took things upon myself, and just trained within my comfort zone. I played against Worcester when I was, I think, 9 weeks pregnant, and then I stopped after that. I wasn't comfortable to continue, and I just trained within my comfort zone. I reduced the weights that I was lifting, became far more aerobic in my training, and yeah, I just sort of did what I felt comfortable and confident doing. I did sort of circuits, body pump and things like that. Once I got to probably 28 or 30 weeks. And I do like, press ups would be against the wall, because obviously you can't do it against the floor because there's a great big bump in the way. But I would, I just worked within my comfort levels, and I did my last circuit session was 3 days before I had Archie. Did lots of walks. I didn't run after 7 months. That wasn't comfortable. And I think if I didn't feel comfortable, I didn't do it. But I went back to training 9 weeks after I had Archie.
What was it like sort of communicating, with your GP and with the coaching staff, and was there kind of a good level of understanding and that sort of thing?
So the coaching setup I was at Saracens at the time. The coaching setup, it was like, it's amazing that you're having a baby, but I'm 2.5 hours away from Saracens. So I was just training on my own at home. I just either went to the gym or, went to the park and did interval sessions or fartlek sessions or whatever. I got a weights bench in the garage. I just did my own thing really, and just stayed in touch with them as to how I could get back into it once I'd had my baby. And again, internationally, it was a bit like, I'm not involved, so I'm not available to play, so that was kind of how it was. I was a qualified sports therapist, so what I did actually end up doing was doing pre and post match massage to players. So I had that link, which was lovely. But as a player, there wasn't the infrastructure to support mothers.
Yeah, and Bez, I guess, like in your experience as sort of a practitioner and an athlete, I mean, do you have any kind of insight or views on sort of the traditional gender roles for women and how that kind of relates to sport, and if times have changed, is it getting better, do you think? Or
I think that as sports science and technology has developed, like athletes, male and female, can stay at the top of their game for a lot longer. And as more money comes into female sport, I know there's nowhere near enough, but as more sponsorship opportunities come in and it becomes more professional, like women can afford to, you know, that they can, it's not like, okay, I need to stop and get a job now. For many women it is like that, but actually we can carry on playing and doing our sport. And so you get to this like 30 stage of life, and most of your education around being a woman has been how not to get pregnant, and no one's really told you how to get pregnant. And there's a complete lack of education, as Davinia alluded to. She just assumed she'd get pregnant. I've been doing a lot of reading about the netballers in Australia, and there's a gynecologist there that says women come to him and say, I want to have my baby on the 22nd of October. That means I need to get pregnant now. And they have no clue. And so I think it's really important that active women and all women, but especially athletes, understand how fertility works and understands how that is, if you're on any kind of hormonal contraception, you kind of have no clue as to whether you are fertile or not, and how that might look like. If you want to sandwich a baby, I work with Olympic athletes who will go, and this Tokyo business coronavirus has messed everything up, because they're like, oh God, like we've now only got 3 years between Tokyo and Paris. Like I was planning on coming out of sport, having my baby, going back in, and now I've only got 3 years to do that. That's not going to work. But it's that understanding your body. And so it's happening. One of my main concerns is that it's there's a bit of a badge of honor conversation happening, and it's a bit of a massive celebration of all these outstanding performances, and this kind of like, oh my God, especially with like the Doha athletics. I can't know if any of you remember that, like in September, was it 2019, September 2019, like the Doha World Championships. And there was like 3 women that had got back to being world champions within a year of having their babies. And it kind of then puts that expectation and pressure that is what should happen. But it's for me, and also this kind of like, there's athletes who have said, oh, I ran 10K the day before I had my baby, and I did 4K swim the day after my baby. And it's like, honestly, who cares? Like, I don't find that inspirational at all. I kind of feel that we need to start talking about this individualized approach without the pressure of expectation of you bouncing back and getting in. Without a doubt, that support has to be there to improve things. But I think it's a really interesting time at the minute, because women can do it and have done it, but it's like there will be women who feel they want to do that but don't do that, and they shouldn't feel like failures because they haven't bounced back or got back in. Like pregnancy, birth, motherhood is a complex situation, and you can't I don't think you can predict how anyone's going to cope with any stage of that.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say about sort of like athletes just having this idealistic thing in their mind about sandwiching a baby in between, competition, and that, they have this timeline in their head. What do you think is kind of, in your mind, what is a really good approach for an athlete that does know that they want to have children at some point, and also wants to continue at a creative level? I mean, what would you say is a good approach?
So I've had 2 children, and I had ended my career. I will answer your question, but I retired from international sport. I retired at 30 because I didn't have a partner, and I wasn't, and I was like, I want to have children, and I want to, find a partner. So I kind of like, I'm going to give up so I can do that. But I approach fertility, pregnancy, childbirth in a very arrogant way. And I approached it in a way that was like, I'm an athlete. Like I my body is good physically, like it won't let me down. And I got pregnant quite quickly, and pregnancy was fine. Childbirth was awful, mainly because of my arrogance to it. I just like, well, everyone tells me it's like a 2K rowing test, or everyone tells me it's like an interval session, so I'll just keep on pushing, and if I just keep on pushing, I'll be fine. And that is the worst approach you can take to childbirth, but I didn't know that at the time. So I think in terms of women that want to kind of have their children go back, they need to understand the science. Like, I was talking to a friend of mine recently who's in her mid to late, she's not an athlete anymore, she was really top level athlete, and she's like, I'll be fine, like I'm fertile, I know I'm fertile. I'm like, you have no clue, like you genuinely don't know. Just because you're menstruating every month does not mean you're fertile. She's like, no, honestly, I really know. And I think athletes have, no disrespect to anyone watching this, but we kind of have an arrogance to our bodies in terms of like, we just assume we're healthy and we're good and we're capable and we will be fine. And we don't actually always take ownership of our health. We have this ability to push and train and do things that people don't expect of us. But when it comes to a point of like checking in with how we're genuinely feeling in our bodies, I don't think we're really great at that. So I think it's really important for athletes to understand fertility, to understand pregnancy. And it's amazing to hear Jenny talk about, I just kind of did what I wanted. And do you know what? Like, that's the best approach. But I kind of feel we're a lot further removed from that now. Like, I don't feel actually people, because of this expectation to keep on going and to bounce back and to train hard and do all that, I don't feel women necessarily trust their bodies to listen to them. So I think if you want to come back in, if you know that you won't listen to yourself, you need to surround yourself with good people, like good experts, good coaches, good physios, good women's health physios, good specialists who are not gonna like cajole you, like, come on, you can do this, like we'll do another week, or like we'll definitely get you back within 8 weeks of having your C-section. You don't need that. You need people that can accurately assess you and establish where you're at and give you the science and the progressions, but you have to trust them and listen to them and not feel that they're holding you back or telling you to stop.
Yeah, it sounds like it needs to be sort of a really honest and open kind of conversation.
Yeah.
And like you say, with people that you trust. I'd be interested, Davinia, to kind of hear your experiences at Quins, but also, you know, with sort of coaching staff and physios and strength and conditioning coaches and things. How did you find that kind of process? And, you know, do you think we need, I guess, more awareness and kind of understanding within those kind of circles?
We really do. We need to. It was sort of a mixed bag at times, because first person at Quins to get pregnant that wants to carry on playing, because Vic Cornbury's sister got pregnant the year before, but she didn't want to carry on playing, so she stopped. But I'm the first one that wants to carry on playing. So obviously there were things that hadn't ever been done before. I'm sure there wasn't a policy written at the time. There is one now, and bits and pieces. And you know, from where I stood, I paid privately to go to a women's health physio to see them and to get advice and to know myself what I can and cannot do. I didn't get a program written for me. I sort of adapted the one that I was given to things that I can and can't do. So on that front, maybe there should be more. We now have more guidelines on what we can and cannot do. So it's a lot clearer. The process is a lot clearer, but there are always things you can do that can improve it. I was sort of in the thought process, I'll get pregnant in January, I'll have the baby by September, and I'll be back by the end of the season, like January time again. So then, you know, 9 months, 3 months back on pitch, because that's what I've heard a lot of women have done. They've had their baby 3 months and got back to it. But I've also heard, like, one of the girls I was chatting to, she had a baby, and she was like, she got back within 3 or 4 months, and she was like, her body was wrecked. It was so hot, it was so painful, and she wished she didn't do it. She wished she just like gave her body time to recover. And I feel if you do not have the sort of like one-to-one physio that an elite athlete is going to have, and when I talk about an elite, like England sort of elite, not club sort of elite, where you're balancing, working, managing your time, and then a baby on top of that. You need to be in and out of physio rooms constantly to be able to get back quick enough, like as quick as you think you're going to be. I don't really have a timeline. I thought right at the beginning maybe I'll get back for the end of the season if, you know, the final gets delayed a bit. But now I'm like, I'll get back when my body tells me I can get back. I know that I had to fight to be at training till week 28. So I was like, I'm training till week 28 regardless. And I look back at it and I think it's a bit stupid. I probably would have stopped running at week 26 because I just felt really heavy. And it was just really, I wasn't doing much running. I was doing the warm-up, and that's about it. I'd stopped playing touch a little while ago. I know some players play touch way up until, you know, month 7, month 8, and people train on the day that they've given birth. I was not like that. I got severe carpal tunnel, so I couldn't even hold a cup of tea by, you know, week 30. So holding a weight was not going to happen. So that's why I focused more sort of on Pilates. And then now coming back, I think it's a bit of a learning curve with Quins, because, you know, there aren't many women that do it, but I feel, seeing as the World Cup's been postponed, I feel for those girls as well, because I know there's going to be a fair amount of them that are waiting to have a baby. And you know, there are women that have done it and they've done it really well. You know, Valerie Adams, the Kiwi shot putter, she had 2 babies in a World Cup cycle, in an Olympic cycle, and both of them were cesareans, and she's come back and she's won a national title again this year. But she has like a whole team of people behind her, and that's the difference where you get, if you don't have a whole team of people behind you, you know, your organs move. That's a thing. My uterus still hasn't shrunk back down to, you know, its normal position, so I wouldn't even contemplate doing any sort of contact work until I felt like it was okay. But even then, I've been advised to start contact work like 6 months, I think. So like 3 months now, getting my body back, and then a 3 month of running, and then to ease myself into hitting something, because I could probably hit something now, but I could not take getting hit, and that's the difference. You know, you have Ebony Beckford Chambers, she just came back from having a baby, and fair play to her coming back, but it's a non-contact sport. It's a non-contact, you're not taking the impact as much as what you will do when you're playing rugby. So she came back 6-7 months to non-contact.
And that timeline that you've just gone through, that kind of 3 months of getting, you know, the guidelines that were like evidence-based that were published last year say that nobody should be running before 3 months, and so before 12 weeks postnatal you shouldn't be doing any impact work. And to get to do impact, as in running impact, not contact impact, to get to impact work, you have to be able to do a set number of things. Like you have to do a squat, you have to do a jump, you have to do some plyometrics, you have to be able to balance. You know, your body, lots of parts of your body has to be strong enough to do that. And then you know, your pelvic floor has to cope with that impact. And then over that next 3 months, like Davinia is saying, you then kind of prep your body into doing whatever else you want it to be doing. But I think what Davinia said there about kind of, there are people that do it. We have this saying at the Well, which is like, you can have it all, you just can't do it all. So if you see these headlines and you see these women, if you dig behind that headline and you say, did you have a night nanny? Did you live with your mum and dad? Did you have a partner that was earning all the money and you weren't stressed about that? Did you have a women's health video that you could see? Like that is not being talked about. We have these star performances and it's like, oh, it's all like, oh my God, like, and it's all this cuteness with their kids, but not what have they got in order to do that? And that is, it's incredible the support that some of these people have, and therefore they can only get into that position because of that. If you don't have that support, it doesn't matter how hard you try, you're just not going to get there. And I think that's and that's not me being defeatist, it's just saying it's bloody hard.
It's
Yeah.
very hard. It's
There's
unbelievably hard.
I was going to throw to you, Jenny, because I know that what we really want to like sort of cover tonight is the reality of it. Because I know when we spoke on the phone, you said you sort of left for a World Cup the day after your son's first birthday, and it was almost like that mother's guilt kind of feeling. And so, can you tell us about that?
So I played in the 2002 World Cup final, and as Baz was saying about the arrogance of your fertility, I'd worked for an obstetrician and gynecologist, and I knew I had endometriosis. So I wanted to give myself a 3-year window to try and conceive. Got married in the August and got pregnant in the September. So I was completely sort of knocked sideways with how easy I'd found it. Had Archie in the May, and that was natural birth. And I felt confident and comfortable to ease myself back into training. I was going to off-season training at Saracens when Archie was 9 weeks old. I went once a week and I just felt what I was comfortable with. And they were really supportive. They're a great group of girls, and the coaches were really supportive. And I just did as much as I could. And then I fell pregnant with Fraser in 2004. Had him in 2005 in the July. I needed surgery 6 days after I had him in order to try and give myself the opportunity to play in the 2006 World Cup. So I had surgery when he was 6 days old. My arm, it was on my wrist. My arm was in a 90-degree cast for 6 weeks. It took another 3 months before I could straighten my arm. By the end of November, I'd got myself back into the Super League, which was like the top 88 girls in the country, and they divvied them out into 4 teams. Then Archie, my eldest, became very ill. And I ended up being with him in hospital for a month. There were national trials in the January. I'd spent a month in hospital with Archie doing sit-ups and press-ups and whatever on the hospital floor. I think I made 1 run in that month because of the nature of what was going on. Got selected for the A's in the January, and we were the flight to Edmonton for the Women's World Cup for that year was on the 17th of July, and Fraser, as you sort of said, I left after the first day after his first birthday. So I went through a massive emotional and physical journey to be available for selection. And actually just thinking about it now, I don't really know how I did it, but I did. And I just took one day at a time, had a very supportive partner and parents. But just, I don't know, I just kind of did it. I wanted both, and I just did what I could to balance both, and kind of got lucky, really. But I only really feel lucky now that my boys, I had a daughter the year after the World Cup. So my boys are 15 and 17 now, and I went through enormous guilt leaving them for a month I put things in place with the team psychologist. So we had a world map on the wall, and we had a pin in Edmonton and a pin in Portsmouth, so that Archie could see this bit of string on the map that looked about 6 inches long. So for him, mummy didn't seem that far away. And he had a teddy, like one of his favorite teddies. I had sort of strapped it to me in the day, so it smelt of me. And we put all these things in place for my 3-year-old, but really hadn't done anything for Fraser, who was 1. And he was actually the child that found it really difficult when I returned after the World Cup. He was like, well, hang on a minute, you weren't around for a month, and you rock up and think that, you know, you can just take me back as you were. And I hadn't considered that element of parenting at all. I'd probably been quite selfish in my pursuit to get one more World Cup under my belt before I called it a day. But at 15 and 17, the boys love the fact that there's a cap on the wall, a shirt on the wall, there's photos of what mum did, and they love it, and they say how proud they are. But it's taken a long time for me to reconcile what I did then with how I feel now, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Totally. And I think what you said as well on the call was like the importance of team culture. And I think you mentioned that the coach of England at the time was quite supportive, and, you know, if you wanted to bring you know, your son down to training or something on the sideline, then it was, you know, it was quite a welcoming environment. Is that something you think is really important?
Yeah, I think that's really important. And actually the coach was, so Jeff was our coach, and he was incredible, because I mean, he was a father, so he understood what it was like. And he would say, you know, Jen, if you want to bring Archie along to training weekends, let's see if we can make that happen. And I think because I was the only mother of a baby at the time, there was another player, but her son was much, much older. He tried to facilitate and support me in, you know, weekends away are tough. And so, yeah, he did everything that he could to support, and was like, when we went to the World Cup in 2006, players could submit for expenses for loss of earnings. And I submitted a form for some home help, because my husband could take 3 weeks off, but not 4. So I submitted a form for home help, and it got rejected. They were like, no, you know, you don't work, you know, that is not a job. And I said, no, I don't get paid to look after my children, but I need to pay for somebody to look after them in order for me to be able to pursue the World Cup. Yeah, and it was the coach that said, no, this is nonsense. We need to cover this. So that was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, thank goodness for having an ally like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as well now that sort of, you know, we're seeing more sort of full-time contracts for female rugby players and, you know, female athletes in general. I wonder if this kind of conversation is going to change slightly. You know, I think things like incorporating like maternity leave into contracts, and even sort of endorsement deals and things. I know there's been talk about like Nike, for example, and Serena Williams. And so it'd be interesting to hear, I guess, thoughts around that. I'm not sure if anyone has kind of a view or any kind of experience so far. Davinia, I mean, how did, like, was there any hesitancy sort of on your part kind of having those conversations at Quinn's?
Of course.
You know, yeah.
You know, because it's not that prevalent, you don't want to be that person. And when I said I was pregnant, contracts were coming out and getting signed. And so I was like, they're not going to support me because I've not signed a contract. And I was like, brilliant, you know, that means then I've got the next 9 plus however many months it takes me to get back on my own. And I was a bit annoyed about it at the time. And then it turns out it wasn't like that. I did get named in the 40, so then I could have the support. But it's, you know, that's a bit rubbish if you think about it. If you weren't named in the 40, you wouldn't have got the support. But but then, you know, where do you draw the line, I suppose? I think it's going to be interesting when I come back playing and we've got away trips. I know we're going to Darlington and we're staying over the night. How does that work out? I know in New Zealand contracts, you can have, if you're still breastfeeding, you can have essentially someone to look after the baby come with you, and so you can breastfeed the baby and pump and whatever, and that's written into their contracts, and it definitely needs to be thought about. I went to Quinn's yesterday and I was like, the amount of things you have to think about expressing your boobs, and then thinking of taking everything to be able to express, and then thinking, have I left enough milk? What time will I get back? And when, and these are all the questions I haven't even contemplated. I thought, I'll go training Tuesday, Thursday, my husband will look after the baby, no problems. And now I'm like, well, I'm hardly going to be exercising if my breasts are this full, because that's just not going to be pleasant. And then you know, you just don't think. And now I'm like, oh, the conversations need to be had of where can I express, because I've not thought of that. I didn't even think that would be a thing to think of, but obviously it is, because if you want to keep on feeding your baby breast milk, you've got to do that. And then you've got to think, I was told that because you're breastfeeding, and I want to breastfeed for as long as possible, you have high levels of estrogen, so then you could be slightly more susceptible to injuries, but that's not a reason to stop breastfeeding. So yeah,
that's where it comes down to personal choice, isn't it? Some people will stop breastfeeding because of that exact reason, and it's the same with when you're considering your birth options, like how, you know, I work with quite a lot of cyclists, and a lot of them just have C-sections because that's what all cyclists seem to do, but actually that's not the right thing. They need to be educated about what a vaginal delivery is like, what a C-section is like, and then they make the right choice for them. And because and it's the same with breastfeeding, that is such a personal choice. We all have this belief system around feeding our babies, and it's like, so, you know, Davina's like, you know what, I am, breastfeeding is so important to me, even if it means my injury risk is a little bit higher, it means my pelvic floor might take a little bit longer, like it might, you know, delay my return back to the pitch by this much, but that's what I want, then that's fine. That is totally grand. That is her decision. She is well informed and she's able to make that choice. And I think that you know, that goes the whole way through, doesn't it? It's individual choice.
Totally. I think, Bez, what you mentioned on one of our earlier calls around kind of, you know, athletes tending to be kind of almost arrogant and going into sort of trying baby and things like that. I mean, what would you, like, are there any sort of nuances or differences to that conversation, being an active woman or an athlete? Are you essentially going into the same as everyone else, or, you know, are there kind of, will you have more of a smoother kind of process after birth, or is it very much, like you said, sort of individualized?
It's individualized. You can't, birth is like something else. Like whatever you've experienced in your life, birth is like a whole different level, and no one tells you about it until you've gone through it, and then you're like, oh, I'm part of the mum club now. Why has no one told me this? And they're like, oh my God, well, I didn't want to tell you, but like, and you're like, Jesus Christ. So it's, being an athlete means nothing. It genuinely means nothing. And I think in some respects, it counters your birth experience in terms of like, from my experience, and not just mine, what other, you know, athlete mums have gone through, you just have this unbelievable belief that you will be fine. You're like, I've made a birth plan, I'm physically fit, I'm capable, look at all these overweight women who like are not in a situation like I am, they're all right, I'll be all right. But what we haven't understood is how to tap into the female parts of us, because that's a very male mindset. And I don't mean, you know, that's a very kind of like linear, push harder, mind over matter approach. And when it comes to birth, although it will sound very woo, It's about tapping into you and listening to your body. And that is a weird conversation for athletes to be having. And I think the first time you have a baby, you're probably, you know, I didn't get it. And that's why I think my birth was like really traumatic the first time around. And I know that, you know, Davinia said her didn't go to plan. Most births don't go to plan, but it's how you handle that, not going to plan. I think like as athletes, we like to be in control. So we think, I've got my birth plan. I've told them I don't want to have any forceps. I've told them I don't want an instrumental delivery. I'm definitely not having, but sometimes you need that. And it's like that, it's having that real understanding of what happens to your body throughout birth. Yeah.
I totally agree. You know, especially coming from a contact sport, you just feel like you can fight anything and everything. And, you know, I most certainly went into the hospital on the Sunday being like, yeah, I've got this. I've got this. Like, honestly, and I did not. You know, it got to Thursday morning and I had not got anything. And I was like,
4 days. That's 4 days. I was in for 3 days, and it's like 3 days of like being on.
Yeah. And you're there and you're thinking, well, everyone else does it. And I fight giants, and I can.
How can I not do this? How is this not? Yeah.
And
an 80-minute rugby match sound like piece of
in my head I was like, it's a sevens tournament, so you know, you go out, you play, you get a bit of a break, you come back, you play a little bit more, then you heavy on the night out, and then you come back again in the morning, you go, and it's like a 3-day tournament, so you keep on having to go and come back again. And it's not, it's really not. It's something my husband kept on saying to me. He was like, you have to just, you want to fight it and you can't fight it, you have to submit to it and you have to understand it. And in my head I just couldn't do that. And it's the same when it came to breastfeeding. I was like, I've watched videos, I understand it, I can do it. and you can't. You need help. And even when you've got the help, sometimes it's hard. And when you're used to getting things quickly and just working at it, because I was saying to myself, I'm feeding him like 12-18 times a day, right? So if I've been doing that for so many weeks, how am I still not getting this? I'm practicing like multiple times a day. And in your you know, competitiveness, I'm like, I should be able to do this, I should, but you don't, because it's not always as simple as, you know, a lot of women make out. You know, they just, like a friend just whipped out a boob, put the baby on, and I was like, I want to be able to do that. I can't do that, but I will be able to, but it just takes a little bit longer than you want anything to take.
And every baby's different. Like I thought after I'd had Archie, I knew what was what. And then Fraser rocked up and just different delivery experience, different baby. Yeah, and it's all different.
Yeah. I'd be interested, Jenny, like sort of now sort of hearing what Davinia and Baz have said about their births and you looking back. I mean, what would you kind of want to see now? I guess if you're in the same position now, you know, what do you think would be kind of an ideal environment for you? What do you wish was there?
I think it's just the support and the fact that Davinia says she's, you know, she has had access to a female physio. I didn't even know they existed. Not the fact that the physio is female, but it's to do with female health specifically and postpartum health specifically. I think actually having worked for an obstetrician and gynecologist, I practiced pelvic floor before delivery and after delivery, even though you're not aware you're doing pelvic floor, mentally I was. So I knew my body was doing it every time I fed. So I took the decision that every time I fed my baby, I would do pelvic floor. And having had 3 children, I can go on a trampoline and control myself. So, you know, I'm very proud of myself for that. That's a big achievement. But for, you know, it's things like that. Women don't, they, you know, as an athlete, it's like Baz has said, they think they fit and that they will just be as they were before having a baby and having a pregnancy. And that's not the case. There's all sorts of changes take place. So I think having access to that, access to a fitness plan, and just the support to be confident in yourself to do what you feel able to do at the rate you feel able to do it. Somebody can't tell you that you need to come back to training 10 weeks after your baby, 20 weeks after your baby. You know, if you feel confident and comfortable physically and emotionally, psychologically, that's what's right for you, and that's great. You know, yeah, that's personally how I feel. It's
And
a
I
personal
think that
journey.
we need, like, just hearing you talk there, Jenny, I was just like clarifying my thoughts around all the experts in babies are quite soft people, and they're very motherly and they're very maternal, and often sports people are like, I don't get what you're trying to tell me here. I'm hearing the words, but they do not connect with me. And I think sport, as more and more women are training throughout the life stages, we're not just talking, you know, we are talking definitely this pre and postnatal period, but also, like, you know, the menopause, like the whole lot. Sport need to start owning these life stages, and sport need to start being happy to have these conversations, so that actually, although there will always be a need to have specialists, like, you know, special gynecologists and obstetricians, actually a strength and conditioning coach can totally have a conversation about how to adapt a bloody strength and conditioning program for a pregnant woman. That is not difficult. Like, by them going out and getting a pre and postnatal qualification does not make them like a posh Chelsea PT. It's like they just want to be able to adapt that to the women they're working with. And I think as soon as sport, because athletes respect their coaches. So as soon as sports start giving women these messages, and the coaches know what the red flags are, they say, you know what, you need to stop running right now because this is not working for you. Like, you'll listen to them. You won't listen to some soft maternal midwife saying, oh, I think it's probably really nice for you to stop running now. Like, it's just, even if that message is the same. So I think sport need to start owning this life stage, because so many more women, not just high performance, but, you know, not just high performance, but like every woman needs to start doing this. And it's not just down to people that call themselves specialists.
I've just read Bertha's message. It is difficult. It's difficult. I feel that people that are being employed in women's sport need to be on the understanding that they're going to be working with pregnant women, because I don't think that that's happening. I think people get employed because they work in sport, but when you're working in women's sport, it's different, and it's very different. And the amount I've learned in the past 12 months is huge. Like, it's massive. I can't even comprehend it. And Jenny, I actually paid to see a women's health physio because I was advised to, but even then, being in elite sport, it was my choice to get pregnant. So I was advised that it'd be really good if you did it, and I read into it and I thought, yeah,
it's non-negotiable. It is not, for my eyes, it's non-negotiable for, like, from your second trimester to have a women's health physio in your
it was
life.
so important for me. I learned so much, and I only went and saw a women's health physio week 28 or something, and then week 20 maybe, and then just a couple of weeks ago, and the advice I got set me through for the whole of the pregnancy, the rest of the pregnancy, and now the advice I've got after that, because you don't get any information from the GPs or from the midwives. Like, it's zero. I actually can't believe how little information I received about trying to stay active.
It's because women and elite sports sort of haven't gone hand in hand. You know, you do your sport, then you retire, then you have your family. Whereas trying to do the two concurrently, you know, I was an isolated case in rugby. You know, I just did it. It was okay, and I wouldn't do it any differently. But it wasn't, you know, players that I played alongside then have had families afterwards. And doing them concurrently isn't the norm. So we do need to be having these conversations to support athletes that choose to do the two at the same time.
It's people are looking at it and thinking that lots of girls my age have retired and have babies, but they've retired to have babies, and I just don't think that's a necessity. The amount of time that I'm going to be out is probably in relationship to having an ACL and getting back from an ACL reconstruction. So what is the difference? And the longer you leave it, there is a clock that ticks.
Mm.
And
but even athletes, I feel, you could even, you can extend a player's career by them having conversations too. So yes, what you guys are saying about like wanting to sandwich it in between like a playing career, but also there will be women leaving sport early because they like, oh, I better go now and have my babies. But actually, if they had fertility testing, if they understood, like if their bodies were healthy, so that they were confident that actually their bodies would be in a reasonable place, they might play for a couple of years longer to extend their career, which would just be a benefit to everybody.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of work for us to do in terms of, like you said, there's not just showcasing the glamorous elite athletes that have all of that kind of support in the background that you don't see on Instagram or and actually like talking about the realities of it and what it actually could be like for those women that don't have that. So no, I think there's definitely some work for all of us to do, and I guess at the Girls Rugby Club, like we'll definitely be kind of revisiting this conversation and trying to kind of, I guess, shine a bit more light on it. What I want to do now is, I guess, open the floor really to anybody that's on here. If you've got a question, feel free to come off mute and pose it to anyone in the group right now. There's one in the chat. Is it Mikan? Did you want to come off mute?
I can come off mute. Yeah, Mikan. Sorry.
I'm
I'll just put in there that from what I hear from what you're saying, that the midwives and so are kind of soft. I have a different perspective of it, but then again, I don't know. We might be a bit harsher on that things in Sweden. But so my midwives told me pretty much from the start that I can do whatever I want as long as it feels good. But when I start feeling this and that, I need to stop. And if I don't stop, it's on me. Or like, she was quite hard. First thing she asked when I got in was, am I active? What sport do I do? And rugby isn't a very big sport in Sweden. So she was more like, rugby, so you hit people. I was like, yeah. She's like, okay, you need to stop doing that from, I'd say, week 12. But if you feel comfortable and depending on where your baby decides they want to place itself, like if it's far back or in front, you could maybe do contact longer. And we had a good conversation about that. But then, well, COVID hit, so I played my last game in week 12 and that was fine. But yeah, they were quite like, everything that I felt fine was fine. I think I stopped running in week 32, and I did my weights. Yeah, I was one of them. I did it the day I went in to deliver, but it was all good. All I wish they would have told me though was not like the pelvic floor exercises. That if you can keep up with your squats and hip thrusters and everything, you do pelvic floor without doing it. But I did the specific pregnancy pelvic floor exercises as well, which meant that, I'm going to come in, do my game plan didn't really happen because apparently I was too strong in my pelvic floor.
Yeah.
So I had the struggle instead of that. He wanted to get out, but my body went, no.
Yeah. That's common in a lot of athletes. They have like hypertonic or tight pelvic floors. Yeah. Like, if you've got a strong body, you're likely to have a strong pelvic. Like the pelvic floor kind of reflects what's going on in the rest of your body. Yeah. And so that's why, that's what athletes we find a lot in. Yeah.
And they told me when I was there, like for delivery, and they were like, oh wait, we see you're an athlete and you played like, And I was like, yeah, I've done that. And then I've also done these extra pelvic floor exercises that everyone tells me to do. And they're like, oh yeah, we need
Didn't
to
need to say
start
that.
telling athletes not to do them, because it takes forever. When
I saw the women's health physio, she told me exactly that. And what we ended up doing is concentrating on the end stage of it, sort of like
To
so
relax and let go and
yeah.
drop. Yeah.
And even though I did that, it you know, it took 4 days and I ended up dilating not very much and going through an insane amount of pain for just to get cut open and have a cesarean. And and if I knew that it could have taken 4 days and to be induced and all the rest of it, and the fact that my pelvic floor probably wouldn't have helped me push either, I would have probably just opted for cesarean, an elective cesarean at the time. But you don't know until you're in that situation. And you're always thinking, I want a natural birth. But you can do a lot of damage having a natural birth as well. So it's a catch-22, really.
yeah, it's also one of them things that the mummy club, because I have teammates of babies, and they're like, oh yeah, no, when I had my second one, I stopped doing anything about that, like that, for like the upcoming 3 months, so it would just slid out. But no, but it was also good because she said since it was strong, I could control it, so I didn't have any tears or whatever, so I came back really quick. So I guess it's a happy medium somewhere that you don't talk about that much.
Yeah, I know that's really interesting to hear. And so are you now back sort of playing, and what's your sort of plan, I guess, from here on?
We play the Southern Hemisphere season kind of because it's too cold for us to play October to April, so we play April till October. Or we were meant to. Now because of COVID, we're probably playing hopefully from June, and a very compact season. But yeah, I'm back playing. Shanks put me in here because I'm opting for my spot back in the national team. But I felt really quick that I could come back to normal, but also I had a strength and conditioning coach that helped me on the side that specializes on post-pregnancy and stuff. So, and I had the look of it as I was rehabbing from an injury. So he held me back, and she told me look, even when I felt, I think I can run, like I have a dog as well, so I chase after him. So I was like, I think I can go for a run. She's like, no, you're not allowed to go for a run. So I think that view that I had, and if I hadn't had her, I would have just maybe rushed it a little bit.
But it sounds to me like you had two very influential people there who didn't miss a beat. So as soon as you went in and talked to your midwife, she didn't miss a beat, and she was she knew how to deal with you. She tapped into your mindset straight away, and she asked you exactly the right questions. So therefore you respected her and you listened to her. Like, I think all midwives are very different, and they're amazing at what they do, but like if you go in and you don't connect with them, and they suddenly tell you you're like that, or they're slow, or they give you the general advice, like in the UK it's 150 minutes of exercise, like moderate exercise, like what all pregnant women should do, and you're like, oh, like that's not me. Like if you don't have that connection, you're just, and we know that women, that athletes, and the IOC have done this research, athletes do not listen to generalized advice. So that's why it's really important that the advice you're receiving is from someone that you respect and value.
Yeah, I think from what I've heard, there's like if you tell the midwife, so I came in telling them that I'm off next week for a training camp with the national team, and I'm going to play a game, and that's fine. And she was like, oh, okay, well, now I know what sort of person I have to deal with. Well, I've had a friend who'd come in and just kind of been sitting quiet, and she felt she didn't get any advice. So I think it's on them to learn, like,
Yeah.
things have changed. There's a lot of women training and doing stuff up until like the day they get into delivery now. As if I talked to my mom and she was like, really, you should just take walks and maybe do some yoga. But so I think it's a little bit on us as well to like tell our midwife that this is what I want to do. And I think that connection I had with my midwife was that I was quite opinionated when I went in, saying that I'm going to play this game in a week, even if I'm 12 weeks. And if you say no, I probably do it anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, nice one. Well, so yeah, thanks very much for sharing that. Lauren, not so much a question, I don't think, but congratulations on the first training session back after having your first baby 6 months ago. That's very exciting. I'm glad we were able to kind of give you some food for thought maybe and help with the journey back. Are there any other questions? Now's your chance.
Yeah, I actually have one. So I don't have children. It is something that I've thought about, and so much of what kind of Davinia was saying earlier on about kind of putting an arbitrary age on it and saying, right, I'll have kids by sort of this point. It's something that's kind of rang very true for me. I was very much of the mindset that it was like one or the other. Like I would have kids at the expense of playing rugby, or I'd play rugby at the expense of having kids. But kind of coming here has kind of made it like, it's kind of given us a different perspective, I suppose. It's been quite eye-opening, which I really appreciate. It's really good. Lauren's actually a player on my team, and we play on the same team. And it's kind of, from my perspective, with us not having children, I kind of came here looking to see if there's anything at kind of a club level we can do to facilitate that return to rugby, make it a bit easier for kind of new mums coming back, and kind of the things that we can do as well to support players that are on like maternity leave from rugby, kind of keep them in the loop, keep them kind of involved in the team to hopefully make that return to rugby that little bit easier for them. Just kind of looking for a bit of perspective from you guys to see kind of what we can do as clubs and as teams and team managers and stuff, like to make it that little bit easier, make people want to come back as well.
I'm sure if you get a hold of your closest women's health physio and have like a direct link in with them, that would definitely help. You know, someone gets pregnant, you say this is a person to see, because you know you end up developing a relationship, and it's obviously good for their business as well, because you've got 30 or so women that might get pregnant.
And if you give if you're doing presents, don't buy them baby grows and lasagnas, buy them a women's health physio appointment. Honestly, that should be the present from the club. Should be a women's health physio appointment. No, they don't need baby grows, they don't need teddy bears, that's what they need. And I like that is I'm sure there's some ideas about how to keep them involved with the club, but without a doubt, like and where you need to look, Joe, is if you look at the NHS have a it's called the NHS Squeezy app, but they have a website with which you can go on to. It's NHS Squeezy app directory, and the directory on there is like, that means because unfortunately women's health physio is not a protected term, so kind of anyone can call themselves a women's health physio. Generally you don't call you women's health physio unless you're well qualified, but there will be some people that haven't done the required courses. So if you go on the NHS Squeezy app directory, everyone on there is part of what's called POGP, which is the physiotherapists of obstetricians and gynecologists. And so they're just kind of like really, really well qualified, and they're all over the country. So you'll be able to find one, and it's worth, even if it's slightly further afield, go finding one and throw them up, talk to them, let them know who you are, and kind of build, like Davinia says, build that rapport and that, so that they say, well, would you talk with our strength and conditioning program? Will you come in and do a workshop? They'll often come in and do workshops for free or like very, very cheaply. Awesome. So that you can just, so it changed the culture. And to be honest, like many women in rugby are wetting themselves anyway and have pelvic floor issues. So it might not just be around pre and postnatal, it might just be a general pelvic floor prolapse kind of chat, and you get pregnancy in there as well. I'm sure they would really connect in.
Awesome, I'll have a look at that. That's great. Thank you. Is there any other, like, obviously again, having not had kids, I'm completely naive to the whole journey of kind of pregnancy and becoming a mum and stuff. Like, what are the kind of perspectives or like aspects that to consider when someone's coming back from kind of childbirth, other than like the gynecological health side of it? Like, I know Lauren, me and Lauren have been kind of talking, and she said the emotional aspect was quite big as well. It's something that's probably overlooked quite a lot, I would imagine.
Yeah, definitely. I remember the first times I was going back to Saracens, it was at the old club, just being able to shower after training in the off season. You know, they hadn't put the hot water on, so I couldn't shower, which meant when I went home at 11 o'clock, I was having to shower so that if I got up in the night, I could feed. It's just having access to really basic things, which I really hope don't exist now. Anything social, make sure that they're included. If they want to just come along and watch the training, sort of say, you know, just bring your baby along, come along and watch us and be involved afterwards. Just make them feel an integral part of the club still, so that they have that connection and are welcome, you know, whenever they are ready, them and their baby.
Thanks.
I know playing back home in New Zealand, we had quite a few girls go through and have babies and then come back. And I think, like you said, Jenny, they just really loved feeling still a part of the team, and that they weren't forgotten about, and that they could still come down and watch if they wanted, and still be in the changing rooms and just still really immersed in that kind of team environment. Because I think that's probably like one of the most special things about women's rugby, is that kind of sisterhood and that kind of family and community.
Definitely.
And I've always felt really welcome to go back, but you kind of feel that the onus is on you to say, is it all right if I come along? So to receive an email or a phone call or a text or something that says, haven't seen you down here for a while, if you're up for it, come along, we've got this match on, or we're training, come along. I think that would just give somebody that possibly might not be feeling particularly emotionally strong or confident to think, do you know what, I'm going to do that. That's a really lovely, expressive term. Be great.
I think you have to like think about if someone's, my thoughts are like, it takes me an hour to get to training, and then it's an hour and a half for a gym, and then we have a meeting for half an hour, and then we're on pitch for an hour and a half, 2 hours, right? So that's up to 9 o'clock, and you're meant to express every 3 hours or something. And in that time, you know, I'll be halfway through a gym session, I'll probably need to think that my boobs are getting heavy, and I need to express before I get onto pitch. So it's and some people might not. So maybe it's talking to them about like when they, like, where would they feel comfortable doing it, because I'd have to do it in a meeting room in front of guys, and I don't know, I'm pretty sure I don't want to be doing that. And it's also like, I feel now currently my body isn't my own, so you're going to have to, a lot of the women coming back are going to feel like, it took me 6 weeks to even touch my stomach, so it's going to take that amount of time for them to be okay about, showering, and reassurance that it's all right. You've just carried another human being, and you're going to look different. So that sort of I don't know, support, just conversations about it, because people will feel a little bit
normalize it a bit.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
I think what we've done to make it easier, well, it's going to be applying for me now as well, but what we did with our previous moms is we've had one session a week that we've been like the important one before games and stuff. So if they don't, like, if it's too much of a chaos back home, they know that this week it's the Thursday session. If I can get away for the Thursday session, I don't have to be there for the Monday and Tuesday or whatever. So it feels a little bit easier that they don't have to be there 3 times a week. They know there's one session, and then we trust each other that we do put in some work at home or whatever we can do. But that we get out saying that, okay, before this week, we're going to have the Thursday session, or next week it's the Tuesday session or whatever. So they know ahead of time which session is the important one for the game if they want to play when they're back to playing, or when I'm back to playing, that I know that if I can only get to one training this week, it's this week.
It's like taking the pressure off a little bit as well. Like
Yeah.
keeping them involved, but without saying like you have to be here X, Y, and Z sort of thing. Cool. Thanks, guys.
Well, thanks so much for this. I mean, I've certainly found it a really, really interesting and valuable chat to have, and really open and honest, which I think is really awesome. We will, like I said before, we've recorded this, so we will be posting it up on YouTube. If you know anyone that couldn't make it tonight or may be interested, please do feel free to send them the link. And I just really encourage you to head across to the Well HQ as well. So that's where you'll find Baz and Emma and Bella, who are doing some incredible stuff over there. So make sure you give them a follow and keep on what they're up to. And yeah, just if you've got any kind of questions for us at the Girls Rugby Club as well, or any other suggestions around topics that you'd like us to cover as well, then do send those across too. But we'll let you go and enjoy the rest of your evening or morning or wherever whatever time it is in your country. But yeah, thanks again, and thanks Davinia, Baz, and Jenny. It's been really amazing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.